Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our second in our AI event series. And yeah, this is part two. For a little reminder for those who did join us or maybe missed part one, we really focused on personal productivity and kind of like back of house efficiency. And for today's session, we really want to shift towards that front end and think about how AI elevates the attendee experience before, during, and after your event. And we're going to kind of segment our conversation today based on those three things. A little thing we would love to do today, which is a bit different, is hear from more of you. So first question, pop in the chat. Where are you joining us from today? I'm actually very fortunate to be joining you all from Puglia, in Italy, which is great. So yeah, let us know whether you're from, what country, city, state, company. We'd love to just get a sense of who's joining us live today. But we also really want to hear your questions, your voice, your thoughts. So do feel free to pop things in the chat. Feel free to raise your hand and we'll try and, bring people off mic and actually ask questions, rather than just dropping it in the chat. So at any point, feel free to pop your hand up. We'd love to hear from you. We want this to be a little bit more interactive this time. And I'm very excited to be joined again by Richelle and Noah, who were here on the first one, and we'll share the first one just in case you did miss it. But Noah, over to you first. Just say hey and introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Nathan. I'm Noah Cheyer. I help run Speak About AI, which is a speaker bureau specifically for helping companies around the world find the top AI experts. We represent 50 plus of the top kind of AI experts in the world, Amazon executives, Google executives, startup founders. And in addition, I also create a lot of free resources for event professionals on how they can use AI to do more with less. So that's both a newsletter and then also create a lot of free custom GPTs.
Amazing. Great to have you back. And yeah, Richelle, over to you.
Thanks for having me back, Nathan. I'm Richelle Westhafer. I lead a global events team at a tech company called Docebo. So my team sits all across North America and Europe, and we run events large and small for internal employees at our own company, as well as a bunch of different external audiences, customers, prospects. So really excited to be back and start to share some of the actual tools and tips and tricks and things that my team is experimenting with. And actually, I think some of my team are on this call and hopefully in the chat so that they can interact with some of you as well. So good to be back.
Amazing. Yeah, as I said, excited to have you both back and appreciate you joining us once again. I'm going to quickly kick things off with a poll and just want to kind of get a sense check of who maybe has incorporated AI into the front end of their event experience. So you should be able to see that poll now. So yeah, feel free to let us know. Already seeing a bit of a mixture come in. Um, Amazing. Just going to give that another second and then I'll share the results. I'm not sure. Can Noah or Shell, can you see the results? I never know if it's live on everyone's screen or if I'm just.
I can see that we're doing a poll, but I can't see the results. So make sure you tell us.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll send it live. But yeah, what's interesting, so I'm just going to end that now and we can share the results. So everyone should be able to see that. But 10% of the audience saying yes, 28% are saying no, and I think quite nicely, 63% are looking into it, which is good to see. That's probably where maybe I expected people to be, on, sort of the majority, starting to think about what we can do here. So going to stop sharing that. And I just want to kick things off. Kind of question to both of you. If you could redesign just one attendee moment with AI in, let's say, the upcoming quarter, whether that's pre-event, during, or post, what would you pick and what would you need to actually make that work? Rochelle, maybe I'll jump to you first.
Okay, for me, without a doubt, this has been a really painful uh, piece of the puzzle across a lot of our event programs. It's the agenda reveal, especially with larger events that are more complex and span multiple days. So, without a doubt, that's it for me. And we're going to be talking about that in just a little bit.
Amazing. How about you, Noah?
Yeah, for me, I think it's really how do you look at attendee data and specifically from a speaker fund. So there's a lot of tools out there now that give you a lot of data and you can do more interactive polls. And I think AI on the back end is a great way of looking at who are the people in your audience and how do you tailor a talk to be better for the people who are there.
Brilliant. So yeah, no, thank you both. And I'm excited to get into expanding on some of those answers as we kind of go through today's session. But I think let's jump in. We said we're going to split this out. Let's talk about that pre-event process. And in the build up to this webinar, we asked everyone when they registered a little question. And one of the a great point that was raised in that process was the value of AI versus authentic, real content, and how should we think about this balance? And I'm just curious, both of you, if you can kind of share your perspective on how AI can be used as a tool to almost enhance that human creativity and interpersonal connection at events rather than probably what some people think is replace it.
Yeah, I can jump in to start. I think it really matters to connect with people at events. I think AI isn't going to be something that really replaces that easily. I'm very much of the perspective of AI should really do a better job of kind of feeling invisible in a lot of ways when it comes to the attendee experience. And when you go to an event, you don't want to feel that you're interacting with AI. You want to feel like you're interacting with people, but you want to see how can AI be used really on the back end to improve the attendee experience as a whole. So whether that's using a networking platform that allows you to match with other people based on your preferences. That's all ran through an AI algorithm on the back end. You don't necessarily need to know that AI is picking out that person for you. But what matters is, are they picking someone relevant that you can really talk to and interact with? So that's at least I would say more on the attendee side of really connecting with other people. On the speaker selection side, and of course for me, where a client will come to me and say, hey, I want a speaker on AI for a specific topic, like say healthcare, and I need someone from California who's local in this budget range. For me, it's a great way of looking through my roster and using AI to kind of prompt and figure out who is the right person. And even if it's something like super niche, like say they want someone specifically for the patient experience, and that's what's most important for them. When I have a roster of 75 plus speakers, it's hard for me to know every single person's bio back and front. So it's a great way of picking out those little details and helping me on the back end really identify who could be the right fit for this event that I wouldn't have considered it originally, but also on the event professional side as well. I think there's a lot you can use with AI tools to first identify a few initial candidates through AI search that you wouldn't have otherwise come across by just doing a Google search and looking through results or scrolling through a bureau website. So I think there's a lot of value on that front as well. And I just recently made a tool that helps with that also.
Amazing. Yeah. And how about you, Rochelle? Just kind of going to come to you first before we kind of dive in.
Yeah, I think like in our last webinar, one of the big takeaways that we left off talking about was when starting to experiment with AI, don't attempt to start with your most complex task, but use it to start with one of the most time consuming. And so one of those most time consuming tasks for my team is without a doubt trying to figure out how to take hundreds of speaker submissions, to kind of the opposite of what Noah is saying, like where Noah is proactively trying to figure out the right external speakers. We're often doing that and trying to figure out through speaker submissions how to turn hundreds of submissions into a really cohesive, well thought out, perfectly targeted agenda that the audience is going to love. And when you multiply that across multiple days and multiple tracks, it is really time consuming and somewhat complex. So we've been experimenting with some different tools that are powered by AI that help us do that. And I can get into that now, or I wasn't sure if you were going to ping pong it back to Noah
Yeah.
for a minute.
Yeah, no, I'm just going to ping it back. Yeah, I'm just going to ping pong around a little bit. I just wanted to get both of
Yeah.
your perspectives at that kind of first point. And Noah, you sort of mentioned before, the event begins and how you're thinking about AI, and I know you've sort of spoken before around like that sales pipeline and how you can shape programming and really thinking about selecting headliners and talent. And I'm just curious, yeah, from your side, like what tools can you share with people? What ideas can you share with people to kind of help with that process and what's been working for you in some of your testing?
Yeah, I think at least on the tools front, a great place to start. Like once again, what's the easiest thing to do that takes the least amount of investment is really just going and using a tool like ChatGPT as a search function. There are also, I think, some really interesting tools that are coming out, more for the average person versus enterprise. But I have a friend who's working on helping essentially record labels, large companies find the right, say, talent to sing or do a performance at their event. And he's leveraging large scale social data at looking at, say, impressions and social posts on an entire platform like Instagram around specific artists to identify who's going to be the one who actually has the most viral potential. So like for an example, he worked with F1 last year to bring in an artist and identified that Sting was popular with young people that wouldn't have been expected. So that's an example of something that we would have never thought of. He didn't think it was correct either, but getting to look at the data and using AI to crunch kind of the large scale information, he was able to identify that as the best artist. And they ended up going with him and booking him for them for F1 Austin last year.
That's really cool. It'd be interesting to see, I feel some of the conversation I've seen on LinkedIn, especially from event planners, is really around, that notion of celebrity speakers, for instance, and how, you could maybe use some of that social listening and audience listening tools to actually qualify that investment, right? And think about, should you be going after these celebrity speakers, or if you are, like which ones you're thinking about? I think that could be a very useful thing for a lot of event planners, definitely.
Yeah, I think especially in the future, we should be looking towards how do we quantify people's kind of price tag as much as possible. I think the challenge, especially with booking a speaker, is how does someone justify the fee that they have? And the more sources of data we can provide and be able to say, hey, this is why this person is worth the fee, means that not only as the event professional, you're going to be getting the best price, but as a speaker, you're going to know better what to charge. Because at least what I run across is there are some speakers, of course, who I think are overcharging for their services, and there are a lot who are completely undercharging and they don't know their own value. So being able to have these data sources that can tell them, hey, this is what your fee actually should be, I think that's something that AI is going to help with and be able to quantify a lot better in the future.
Definitely. And Richelle, I wanted to come to you. I know you sort of started talking there a little bit about evaluating speaker submissions, and there's a question as well in the chat from Kirsten that I think is going to kind of tie into some of the stuff that you're going to talk about here. But yeah, I just wanted to sort of jump back to what you were talking about there and just get a little bit more insight into what it is specifically you're doing and how you're approaching it and how it's helping you so far.
Yeah. So, Kirsten, I'm glad you asked. The answer is yes. But first, let's just take 2 seconds to think about how we would typically accomplish this task of sorting through submissions and turning them into a cohesive agenda. You have to first define how you want to organize your content across the event. You have to design some type of a submission or intake form in a way that's going to capture the right data to help you evaluate those sessions. You then have to determine some type of a selection committee and get them all bought into the process. You have to route all of the abstracts that are coming in to all the right reviewers. You have to ensure that bias is being managed across those multiple reviewers. You then have to figure out how to share the data across those people, narrow down the choices, and keep everyone aligned. And this can take, in my experience, weeks, even months. And it's been a huge pain point in us getting to a place where we finally are able to reveal the agenda. And that hinders people wanting to register because if they don't know what the content is, they're hesitant to, opt in and buy a ticket for the event. So what we've been experimenting with is a tool called Session Board. There's probably other tools that are really similar. And what this tool does, it does not replace our review committee or a lot of those important steps I just mentioned, but it does give us a much, much better starting point using AI. So we are able to set up those evaluation criteria and the rubrics in advance. We're able to input a bunch of data about the themes and the content and the things we're trying to accomplish, things like audience relevance, topic originality, speaker diversity, all of the things that are important to us. And then AI is able to score and evaluate and kind of do that first pass of each submission and route it to the right person that we've identified who's like owning that track. And so we're able to sort through and get stronger submissions faster and like surface those hidden gems. And the team that's in the weeds managing this process with us is also just more easily organized and managed. And so Kirsten, it also does go on then to manage, once we've selected those speakers, everything's managed in that same tool. So the speakers' bios, their checklist of things that they need to provide us, their headshot, whatever that is, And then all of that intelligently pulls through to our event app that the attendees will use on the event day. So we're literally just piloting this right now for the first time, but just to give you a sense of the timeline impact, like I mentioned, this used to take us months to the point where our C-suite were like, where's the agenda? Like freaking out. And this year we evaluated the tool in August. We piloted it fast, and I'll come back to speed in a minute. But we sourced it and evaluated it and basically bought it in August. We went live with our registration and speaker submission first week of September. We're closing speaker submission first week of October. And then we're hoping to publish the agenda in early November. So from closing the speaker submission to publishing the agenda, we've cut that way, way, way down. And for those of you who aren't building agendas, think about this same type of technology or like how AI can help. We're also hacking this for award submissions. So if that's something you manage, that might be a helpful way. There may be some other use cases that aren't exactly speaker submission. You could maybe even use this for some sponsor management and things like that. So that's just one thing we're trying. I'll keep you all posted, but so far so good. We were able to ramp up really quickly and just get this off the ground. And that's where having that buy-in or having an IT team or a purchasing process that's not overly cumbersome allows you to test and pilot things quickly. And if they work, amazing. If it doesn't, that's okay. We're all just kind of in this experimentation mode. If I have another moment, I do have another hack for those of you who aren't like investing in a tool dedicated to this. One of my teammates is in the chat here. She's on this call. Her name is Jen. But one of the things we talked about in the last webinar was understanding all the available AI tools at your company, even ones that seem like they might not belong to the events team or maybe the marketing team. So our sales team uses a tool called Gong. It's pretty popular. You may have heard of it. And it's a sales intelligence tool. It's scraping thousands of sales calls, emails, and it's gathering all of that intel. And so at Docebo, we have like a knowledge base that is generated from all of that Gong intelligence. And so Jen did something really smart. She asked that tool, that intelligence platform, she fed it like what we're looking for in terms of our speakers and asked it to surface some of our own customers that might be a match to some of those topics. And it was able to instantly spit back out like, hey, these are some logos, these are some individuals, these are some things that they talk about or the way that they do business with you all. And so in addition to, again, receiving those speaker submissions, we're also able to do some proactive outreach and tap into our own customers to get them on our stages as well.
I love that. I think that's such a creative way to use an existing tool that if you're not talking about AI with other departments, you might not be able to, put those pieces of the jigsaw together. So I think that's great. I just wanted to come back to one thing around, I guess, using a tool to score and kind of, do some of that initial work for you ahead of time. So like, did you have to think about setting that criteria to ensure the model scores fairly? And how did you kind of approach that to ensure that you didn't miss out or you're not going to miss out on some of those speakers that you might actually want?
I think that's where the crucial piece of the human layer comes in. So setting up that rubric and wording it in a way. We actually just got off a call before I joined this one where we were gut checking if we had worded our own criteria properly, especially around diversity and inclusion. And the way we worded it for ourselves was like, does this speaker submission bring a unique perspective to the content? Or like, I forget exactly how we worded it, but it was something like that where it wasn't just about like what that person looked like, but it was like, are they bringing a unique or diverse perspective that can help enrich the content and enrich that experience for the folks in that session. And then of course, like we have to discuss it as a team. So it's meant to really help us word things consistently and fairly for all of the people submitting their speaker submissions, and then for us to evaluate. So actually having that conversation of saying, wait, let's go back to how we worded that and like, let's gut check ourselves. I think it has to be that two-pronged approach, which has kind of been the theme through most of these AI discussions that we're having. It's that it can help us get that leg up and move things along more quickly, but it's never going to replace that common sense human layer that really does need to gut check what the heck we're doing.
Okay, yeah, no, it's good to get that extra context. And before we move on to during event, Noah, I just wanted to come to you and ask a question, especially because you're so tapped into event planners and a discussion around AI at the moment. And for anyone that's maybe not joined Noah's WhatsApp community, we should, yeah, highly recommend just getting the link and jumping in. There's a lot of event planners talking about AI across the whole spectrum of event planning. But I just thinking of that pre-event process and your kind of exposure and connection with event planners. I'm just how are you seeing AI effectively used in that streamlining of event comms or crafting marketing copy or social media content or personalizing attended? There's a whole host of pre-event comms that we can kind of bucket under there. But do you have any tips or examples of ways in which people can kind of get ahead with AI in that area?
Yeah, I don't know how much I talked about this in the last webinar, but something that I definitely have been encouraging people to do is really transition from what used to be the event binder and going from the event binder. Now we're kind of at the event spreadsheet, but taking that from kind of the event spreadsheet all the way to having your own kind of AI twin for an event. So a lot of the event professionals I've talked to, a lot of it does, I think, come down to almost a little bit of babysitting, where there's so many things happening. There might be a client, there are speakers, there are all of these different stakeholders, and you end up being this central information hub, and you have to be the one who gets everything right. Kind of in a lot of ways like customer service, of being able to answer all of these different questions. And I think AI really has a great opportunity if you're able to feed a lot of this information into AI, at least at a basic level, to kind of outsource some of this to an AI twin of yourself. Where if they're asking a very basic question of like, when does this speaker need to go on stage? Or say you have a team member coming in and they're not up to speed and you have to train them, and they're an event coordinator coming in with 8 weeks until the event. Like you don't necessarily have time to sit down with them for an hour and like explain everything. So having a tool that can answer their base level questions, but also you build in the thought process as well, where if it's asking a question and it doesn't know the answer, you say, hey, if you don't know the answer to this, make sure to ask, say, Richelle. Make sure to escalate it to Richelle. So really adding in the lines of what can it answer, what can it not answer. I think there's a ton of value for being able to outsource some of those Slack messages that people just get stuck in, that takes them away from the strategic work and fires that really need to be put out.
Yeah, I love that. And that is, yeah, good callback as well to some of the things you did share in the first webinar. But yeah, good to just kind of get that frame of mind and referencing. I just want to say before we do jump into, the during event, just a reminder to people going to keep pushing, just say like, raise your hand. We want to hear you come off mic if you've got any questions. And I think, one thing I do want to just kind of just stating this, this is a conversation that's new for a lot of people. And I feel like if you're, worried that your question might be too basic or too technical, that doesn't matter, right? Because this is a conversation that everyone is definitely evolving with together. And yeah, we absolutely want to hear from you. I might put the odd question in chat like I have, and we'd love to get your feedback there too. But yeah, don't be afraid. We definitely want to hear from people if you're up for raising your hand and coming off mic.
Nathan, I just have to give a shout out to Abby. I'm laughing as you write that because as long as I have been doing this my whole career, isn't it hilarious that of all the complex things we all manage, name tags are like the bane of our existence to this day. Like they still suck. There's still no good way to go about them. There's still a huge pain. So yes, I feel you. My heart bleeds with you. Name tags.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then yeah, so let's kind of take the conversation into during the event. And I feel like this is yeah, a real big component that I've been excited to get into. And again, in that audience data at the point of registration, we saw a lot of people kind of talking about that during event experience and either wanting to understand ways in which people can be thinking about how to integrate AI. And Richelle, I kind of wanted to come to you first. You know, that experience of being on site at an event, there is so much information, that we might lose. We lose quite rich insights that maybe aren't otherwise have been able to be captured. And I'm just curious from your standpoint in the events that you're running, are you testing anything for AI for, in-person notes or in-person information or anything like that?
Ooh, we are. Well, we are, and I'm seeing more of this. One of the things we are experimenting with at an upcoming industry like trade show addresses something that is really painful in that like oftentimes we have a ton of intelligence pre-event, we get a lot of data post-event, but when we're on the show floor and the magic of the in-person experience is happening and conversations are taking place, we lose a lot of that in between. And then we tell ourselves, I'll remember to write that down. And I'll remember, we hope the sales teams will remember to make those notes. And of course, they never do. So one of the things I'm starting to see more, and we will be trying this November, is like allowing virtual note taking, like actually having a recording device that is listening to those in-person conversations, obviously with consent and not in a super creepy way, but so that we are like removing that human error that always ends up happening and just allowing for those notes to be taken so that when the event wraps, again, we've got a better starting point. We've got something down on paper, so to speak, that then the human layer can go and say, yes, I did speak to that person. I'm going to finish off these notes. And then the follow-up action can happen so much more quickly and consistently. So that is one thing I'm seeing. And the other thing I want to talk about on site is facial recognition,
Mm.
which I can jump into now, Nathan, if you want, or
Yeah,
if,
absolutely. Yeah, my next question was going to be around just what on-site
yeah.
tools. So yeah, jump right in.
This is one of my favorite things. So I'm a super visual person. Like we spend all these money on these incredible events. And then one of the most rewarding parts for me, and I think for many of you, is when you see the incredible photos and videos that come out of it. So I'm sure, if we think again about the way we do things now, we've got our photographers and videographers, they're roaming around, they're capturing all of this incredible content, and then they dump it into a folder or a Dropbox of some kind, and then we all frantically sift through it and try to figure out how to use it and how to get it to the right people. But my team for the past year or so have been partnering with a facial recognition photo sharing company called Getpika. Again, there are others. You don't have to, it's not just about this particular tool. But what it does is it allows our photographers and videographers to upload all their photos into a tool. And then it allows the attendees to opt in, take a selfie, and instantly match and provide a completely personalized photo album at the event. So you can imagine, for whether you're an attendee, a speaker, a sponsor, being able to have professional photos instantly really starts to amplify the amount of sharing. Everyone loves to share a great photo of themselves. So this really helps make that happen in a really fast and efficient way that we've never really been able to do before. And it's not just for like we do corporate events, but you can imagine this technology applies to galas, film fests, stadiums, races, marathons, like all of that stuff, anything where there's large crowds of people, this is something that can really supercharge the way that we share memory making at the events. At our event, 91% of our attendees activated Getpika, meaning they were willing to take a selfie and down or get their photos, which interestingly was up from 67% at an event we did just 6 months prior in Europe. So it starts to bring in these interesting questions of adoption, like is it a cultural thing? Maybe in Europe are people a little more hesitant to provide that, like what's essentially biometric data when you're using facial recognition? They tend to be a little more conservative around data usage and things like that. So it's interesting to see how that adoption is starting to take place. Yeah, Karina, you're saying that's totally Europe. They're just a little more conservative when it comes to stuff like that. And in North America, we're like, yeah, let's take the selfie and get those pics. So yeah, that's just one thing we are experimenting with. And again, you can expand that out to think about how can facial recognition impact security, like check-in, access control, maybe speeding up badging and entering into those events. And another really interesting one I'm starting to read about is using facial recognition to measure sentiment. So it's actually like assessing your facial expressions to determine how into something that person may be, or if they're zoning out and like not digging it at all. So some really cool stuff. I'd be curious to see what you're all hearing about, reading about, or trying when it comes to facial recognition.
Did you see, because I guess, one of the things I always think about with any event in my life that I attend is that I'm rubbish at taking pictures. I always forget. And, that notion of I can take a picture of myself and then essentially be fed those photos. Did you see any increase or did you monitor any increase in people posting about the event on, LinkedIn or wherever, the right social channel would have been? Did you kind of see any correlation there?
I sure did. So, of the 91% who activated their personal album, 62% of them shared on social. And that's all tracked right within this tool as well. So, we're able to get a lot of that social amplification data, which we like to use post-event in our debrief as well. So, 91% used it, 62% shared on social platforms. The other cool thing we did, Nathan, is it's not just it doesn't have to just be the photos that the individual's in. We can also feed it some really great, like if there's some standard pictures that maybe everyone would want to use. So think about a great shot of like the welcome, some like welcome wall or arrival experience or the keynote. Like there may be a standard set of 5 to 10 photos that everyone would benefit from having in their album. So you can pre-seed everyone's album with those photos, and then it will supplement that with the ones that they're actually in, and only the ones that they're actually in. And of course, I should just be clear, people can also like opt not to be in this. There's some really cool options as well, where if you've opted out, it can blur your face and make sure that you're not showing in it. So some really cool stuff.
Yeah, that's really cool. I love that. I'm gonna check that tool out myself, to be honest. Yeah, because I think that component of seeing an uptick in people sharing about your event, right? One, that's great just because it builds community, it builds excitement after the event, but also just from a marketing perspective, we all want people sharing and talking about our events and it not just coming from one place. So yeah, really exciting. And Noah, I wanted to come to you as well in sort of the notion of that during the event experience and from your side of thinking and the tools and everything that you're working on, like where have you seen the ability to influence that experience on site and really, see event planners maybe making an impact or trying some exciting new things?
Yeah, I would say a lot of it has been coming from kind of the vendor side. I think as Richelle talked about, there are a lot of, I think, pretty interesting vendors in this space who are trying to solve a few of these different problems. Like how do you source the right, like get everyone the photos that they need? Another one that I've kind of been in talks with is called Bondi, and it's still very early stage. I'm still working with them to kind of get a prototype running. But essentially, the goal is to create a bot within the WhatsApp group that we mentioned and have that bot be able to help match people within the group from different perspectives. So really on that attendee matching experience, both for communities, but also for events. So before you go, you can get kind of a personalized list of meetings. So whether you're on the supplier side and you're like, hey, I want to be matched with a certain type of person, or if you're, say, an event professional, it'll ask you essentially 20 questions. And from there, you can kind of put in your preferences of, do you want to just meet with event professionals? Are there certain services you're looking for? And similarly in the WhatsApp group, trying to be able to hopefully match people with different problems and at different stages. That's ultimately the goal down the line of being able to provide that as a service where people are able to really connect with other like-minded people where they just have to answer questions via WhatsApp. That's super natural. They don't have to fill out a form. They don't have to kind of jump through a lot of hoops, and it does all the matching on its own. So I don't have to go through a spreadsheet and do that myself. So I think that's a really interesting kind of opportunity, but I think there's a lot more on the vendor side as well of whether it's doing kind of more interesting AI images, things like that. But I would say like really get used to kind of the vendor space on that side because I think we're going to see a lot more of it. And in my opinion, I think the more seamless it feels for the attendee, the more it feels less like they're using AI, the better it's going to be.
Yeah, definitely. I remember that conversation we had a couple of weeks ago about that. It's everyone wants to be using and testing AI, but actually that feeling of AI in the background doing a lot of heavy lifting or making things easier or faster or whatever it is the AI that's gonna be successful because it's making a real difference rather than being, overly gimmicky or, sort of a flash in the pan type of solution. I wanted to pause and just take a moment, give an opportunity of, before we kind of go on to our final section of the day and just see if anyone did have anything they would want to share or any questions they want to ask about that during event experience. And just before we move on, just a reminder, we'd love if anyone does feel comfortable to raise their hand, or maybe what I'd love to hear is even if it's just in the chat, people sharing of things they've tested when it comes to that on-site experience with AI. Um, but yeah, feel free to raise your hand at any point or pop that in the chat. So let's tackle, I guess, the final piece of the jigsaw, post-event. No, I'm going to kind of come to you first. And really just thinking about that post-event experience, we all want to create content. We all want to leverage the information we have, whether that's from our speakers, whether that's stuff that's happened in an event app or shared on social, feedback, etc. What what are you seeing? What are you doing to kind of help with that content creation aspect, that post-event marketing of event data, recaps, all of that sort of fun and exciting stuff? Yeah, what can you share with people to really enhance that?
Yeah, so I like to classify kind of AI for content creation into two different buckets. And I would say they're at different kind of levels now, at least for human interaction. The first I would say is more like informational content. So Rochelle kind of touched on the process of finding whatever it is, the 100 speakers you need through a call for speakers. The other piece of that is how do you get all their bios? How do you create all of this content for 100 speakers when you're a bootstrapped event team? That's really difficult. And the goal for that isn't to necessarily get people to want to convert on all these speakers. When you have 100, it's just about getting all the content out there. So I think that's a really good use case of being able to use AI to write some of that content where when you're doing something at that level of scale and you're a bootstrap team, you just don't have the time and effort to kind of afford to give every speaker that individual attention. Versus the other piece of it is how do you create content that's attention grabbing that converts off of LinkedIn, a social platform, in a blog, in a newsletter. And that's where I think there needs to be a lot more human touch through that process. So like, for example, say you film a session, you have a speaker that went on stage, you have the full recording of that. You can use a tool like Opus Clip. There's a lot of competitors to it. You can find your own, but if you're really bootstrapped for time, it's a great way of turning that into a ton of different social clips, but I'll also transcribe it. So then you can get the transcription of that video and from there repurpose it into um, a lot of other mediums. I will say I'm still not completely sold that what Opus Clips creates and a lot of its competitors like Veed.io, I'm still not convinced they're that good yet. Like compared to me just editing it myself, they're like 85% of the way there. But do I think they're the best content out there? Like you're going to toss it in, it's going to give you the best thing. No, it's still going to be a little bit choppy. There's still going to be some issues with it. So if you're really rushed for time and you're like, hey, I can't create this content on my own, I would say go for it because some content's better than none. But at the same time, if you have the bandwidth to still do at least some of the initial editing and just make it more smooth, it's going to look more professional than the AI tools that I've seen as kind of in the last year. The other piece of it is on the writing side. I think it's great for a first pass. My advice is give it as much context as possible, whether you're using Claude, whether you're using ChatGPT to really make sure that it understands your writing style. It has past examples of what is the output supposed to look like. I use it a lot for my newsletter specifically, just because it's a very traditional format. But even then, I'm still going through line by line and making sure that in my newsletter, all of it feels authentic, sounds like me, doesn't use all of the same AI cliches of M dashes, unfortunately, and kind of other pieces. So it's still to some degree a manual process and making something sound human and sound like it isn't perfect yet. I think the more data you can give it, the better it's going to be. But even then, I think there's still a decent ways to go. So it's not just like you click a button and it gives you something that's engaging. But if you're trying to just rank for SEO, if you're just trying to get all of these pages for speakers made, I think it's more reasonable and you can kind of settle for that output a little bit more. than if you're trying to create a LinkedIn post that are going to drive people to registration, or trying to create an email that's supposed to convert people to registration. For that, I think you really have to still give it the same level of attention to detail.
Yeah, I totally agree. Especially, yeah, I use Veed.io, and it can be a little bit, it's not quite there yet. It can definitely, yeah, it does speed up some of my processes, but I still find sometimes with a lot of stuff, it can also, slow me down a little bit. And I wonder if I might have just tackled the task myself. I could have got there faster or at least in the same amount of time. I wanted to kind of, and Richelle, I'm going to bring you in on this question too, because I think it's important that as people might be utilizing AI a little bit more for content creation, whether that's email, social, write-ups, whatever it may be. How do you think about brand voice, right, and keeping that consistent? And how do you make sure that you don't lose that sense of who you are, who your event is, who your organization is you're trying to essentially do more faster, right? That's what we're all hoping AI does. It's about deployment, it's efficiency, it's getting more out there, it's giving us more reach. But that can also really throw up a question of, one, are we all going to sound the same? But actually, have we drifted from our tone, our voice?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to give a little bit of love and talk for a minute about virtual events and webinars. That's another thing that my team covers in addition to the in-person experiences. And our webinar lead is doing some really scrappy but smart things in the way she's using AI to do just that, to really tailor and personalize the interactions during the webinars and the follow-up coming out of them. And this is a pretty easy thing to do using tools that we all use. So she's using Zoom and ChatGPT, and she's exporting the chats that happen during the webinars, which are all captured on the back end. These chats are where there's a ton of gold sitting in those chats, especially on larger virtual events where there may be hundreds and hundreds of comments happening. So she is exporting those, feeding them into a tool like ChatGPT, and consolidating from hundreds of comments down to 5 to 10 themes and buckets, and pulling out maybe some things that actually need some maybe one-to-one follow-up that she might want to get straight to our product team or straight to our sales team or our customer team, that they can actually do that individualized human touch. So she's able to route those, and then she's able to take those broader themes and buckets and think about, how do we follow up? Do we take those 5 to 10 things and address them in our community group? Do we tailor the next webinar because that's what people are asking for? And then I think going into the content, post webinar, Noah, we're doing the same thing like what you just talked about. We use a similar tool that's able to take long form content and really quickly generate microsites, white papers, snackable social video clips, and other types of media. But being able to connect the actual data from the attendees, or the actual sentiment and insights from those chats, and then tailor the stuff that we're sharing out afterwards, I think helps connect the dots between authentic brand voice and just blurting out content that's not really connected to what people were taking the time to contribute and share in those chats. So that's one of the things that we've been experimenting with. And Noah, similarly, we've been finding that tool, what it produces on a first go is maybe 80% usable. And then with 20 to 30 minutes of editing, from our webinar lead, she's not a designer, she's not a videographer, but she is able to produce market ready stuff on her own in 20 to 30 minutes and get it to that 100%. I mean, she's also just really talented and has a good sense of brand voice, but it's certainly a lot easier and a lot less burdensome that we don't have to wait on all of these other teams to help us get the content and keep things moving quickly. Because I think, as we all feel, today is all about speed. And so following up on something, anything other than instantly, feels slow. So these tools are really able to help us move things along. I think also in the chat, it may have scrolled up. Abby mentioned using AI to replace the folks who are sitting at tables on site answering FAQs, pointing people in the right direction. I totally agree, Abby. And I think, Noah, you could probably speak to this. Like the ability to create either your own custom bots or tools that are like for your event specifically can take away a lot of that burden of answering those same repetitive things. Noah, not to put you on the spot, but I feel like you are like awesome at building custom things. And there are tools out of the box that help do this as well. But I am seeing this more and more where like building custom agents specifically for an event that act as that host or as that volunteer sitting at the table that can help keep the experience really smooth.
Yeah. So what I talked about, I would say, was more on really the back end of how to use it for internal teams and also for, say, vendors, partners, things like that. And the reason I say that is because I think there's still a bit of a challenge on the attendee side, as you kind of talked about, Rochelle, of adoption, where the dynamic is very different with you and your attendees than it is with you and a vendor or you and a team member, where they, to some degree, are expected to meet you halfway with whatever you're using. And I think in general, people are over bloated with a whole bunch of different tools and interfaces. And if you're a vendor and you're working with, say, 15 different like events or coordinators, and every single one has their own process, like that's really difficult to learn. You don't have time to learn every single process for every event professional. So I think the texting is still a better alternative. My worry is, at least in the attendee side, that the attendees aren't kind of catching up to that yet. It's kind of like, as you talked about, like 63% of people didn't feel or 63% versus 91% felt comfortable using kind of the AI facial recognition. My worry is that even at kind of an attendee level, they're still not going to know that it's in the app, or they're not going to have the same level of adoption because it's going to be different for every event. It might be confused. So that's kind of my devil's advocate of, I think it could be a really good use case, but part of it is, how do you look at where attendees are at and make sure that if you're making that full swap of not having an FAQ person on site, like, are people ready for that? And are they going to actually use it if you build it into your app, versus building it into the app and then people still being confused because they don't know it's there, they haven't used it before, they don't expect that to be a thing. So that's the one kind of cautionary tale, I would say, where I think there's still some social change that has to happen on a general level for us to really get to that being 100% worth it.
Yeah, we've got a sort of question here around ROI and sort of measuring impact and ensuring that when we implement, AI to improve attendee satisfaction or, event outcomes, like how are you thinking about ROI, or how are you ensuring that when you do utilize a tool, it's actually delivering on what you're setting out to deploy that tool on?
Yeah, I was starting to jot down some notes in real time, Kirsten, to think about how we're doing this. And there's a couple different ways. There's not just one way. But if I think of organizing this same thing pre, during, and post, the pre-event, like us getting the agenda out sooner using AI, I'll be looking at things like the trajectory of our ticket sales to tell us whether or not getting that agenda out sooner helped propel event registration patterns in a more favorable way, because people weren't hesitating and not registering until that agenda went live. Then going back to the idea of like better tailored content, more relevant content, hopefully leading to more satisfaction on the attendee side, we'll be looking at session scores and hoping to connect those dots of like better agenda, better sessions, better satisfaction across the way that we measure all of that content. During the event, I would shift into more of those brand and social metrics, looking at sharing, looking at engagement. And then post-event, I hadn't got my brain all the way to post-event as I was thinking about it, but I would probably go back into the survey data. Actually, it's usually like a hybrid of both of those things. It's like, how can we use AI to maybe dump some of that more qualitative data, comments, things like that aren't captured in a form, and look at that up against the data that we do have from something more structured like a survey to try to tell that story. But there is no like one way to tell this story yet of what is the ROI of using these tools. So this is where I think it's important to have a dialogue with the leadership teams. If you are trying to get buy-in, if you are trying to get that like level of consent and collaboration to try some of these different tools, I always try to say like, well, what are others doing? What stats maybe do they have to hold up that I can say, so-and-so has found this. I would love to try it. And then it's really about the confidence to try something and maybe even fail. Like I'm okay on my team or to my leadership team to say, hey, I tried something and we actually found it didn't work. To me, that's just as compelling ruling something out as when something is a runaway hit. That's just where we're at with some of these tools and things that we're trying. They're not all going to work, and I think that that's okay. But I always try to quantify what I can. And I've found that AI being able to quantify some of that softer sentiment data or like input has been really helpful. Like the example I just gave with the webinars, that's something we've never really typically been able to do. Like we would say, oh, people loved it. The chat was on fire. People seemed really happy. But now we're actually able to quantify that. You could dump that whole chat into a tool and ask for specifics, like how many of the comments seemed positive, how many seemed neutral. Like you can get creative with trying to quantify some of the stuff that you're doing. I hope that's a good answer just off the top of my head. But if anyone else has other ways that they are trying to show the return on some of these experiments, I would love to hear it.
Yeah, I think it's so important to be able to follow the data, as Richelle was saying. Like, I think data is key, and with AI, we have more data than ever. And it's really up to us to quantify. Like, I think of it as kind of a spectrum on two sides. One is it saving you time? Because a lot of it is going to be coming down to kind of the how many people are having to put time into this. And then the other side is how good is the output? So if you're saving 50% of time on something and you're getting the same output or it's equal quality, then it's probably worth you heavily investing into that. But being able to really quantify, like, is the output better? Like, are we actually getting something that's uh, providing a better output with the resources that we have? Or is it really cutting our team's time down on a specific sector so much that even if the output is the same, it's still worth investing into? And I think the other kind of key is AI is very much not perfect, as Rochelle's talked about. There's gonna be stuff that fails. There's gonna be stuff that doesn't work, that it doesn't give you the outcome that you're looking for. But I think we need to make sure that we still have that realistic expectation of we just need it to be as good as a human. It doesn't have to be this perfect thing. Humans make mistakes. We all make mistakes in our jobs. AI is going to make mistakes sometimes. And in some cases, if we're saving that much time, it's worth living with. It doesn't have to get it right 100% of the time.
I think that is such a good point, Noah. And like what my team has sort of been experiencing is that if our webinar coordinator or an event manager, they're not copywriters, but if they can produce a first draft of their own landing page copy, follow-up email, whatever it may be, and that first draft using AI, it's again that like 85% good, that's amazing. That's like such a difference from not too long ago where you'd have to put in some type of a request and hope that your brand team, someone on the writing team, they'll be like, great, I'll get you a first draft in 1 week, and then we need a 3-day turnaround to do first review, and then we need another 2 days for second review. And these things just take days and days, and we just don't exist in that world anymore. So I think, Noah, your point on like the time savings, and not just of all of us, but on the other teams within the business, the writers, the designers, the videographers, the management, whatever that is, for leaders on their teams, like the speed at which I'm able to produce scenarios or business cases for things using AI would take me forever before, and now I'm able to do, almost instantly. So that's a really, really great point.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because I just got to see uh, Tomer Cohen, who's the CPO of LinkedIn, speak at a conference a few weeks ago. And he talked about within LinkedIn, their strategy specifically is still having these kind of teams have a core function and then ownership over a lot of things. So,
Hmm.
for example, on the design team, they might be leading a design project for LinkedIn, but there might be some pieces of it that are technical that would typically need a programmer. And he's
Hmm.
encouraging his designers to use ChatGPT and use AI tools to do the programming or changes themselves. So they don't have to have that kind of communication cycle, sending it there and sending it back and reviewing it and like having all of that. He's really encouraging his programmers to learn how to design a little bit and his designers to learn how to program a little bit and having more be based on the general function. What are we trying to achieve? What's the goal? And less so about, hey, this is my job and this is your job.
That is so exactly what we're seeing. I mean, the company I work for, we're a learning company, so think like enterprise learning, and it bleeds a little bit into like the HR space. But we talk a lot about the role of all of us as working individuals and the way things are shifting, and it's exactly that, Noah. It's like we all need to reimagine our jobs and what we're capable of, and redefine ourselves a little bit, in dabbling in some of those other things that maybe we would have waited on someone whose sole core competency is a writer or a designer or whatever that may be, and to really like blur those lines. It's really interesting to see those shifts and trends, but we are always talking about upskilling, reskilling, and rethinking those roles because of AI and the impact that it's having on everyone's jobs. And our CMO is also very much about that. He's really taken our entire marketing team and encouraged us all to think that way, so that we've cut out all those middle steps and anyone can produce a first draft of copywriting. I'm just using this as the example. And instead of waiting on a writer to write it for us, it's taking it to a writer to say, how does this look? Any final tweaks? And that takes 10 minutes instead of 10 days. So it's very much what we're seeing as well.
I think with that, and I know we're almost up on time, and I just wanted to kind of use Mike's point to actually sort of wrap up this discussion because I think he does make a good point around, using caution of that, using AI to replace humans, and I think I mean, that's true for every industry, but I think that's especially true for the events industry, right? Events are built on human connection, people meeting each other, learning with one another, sharing knowledge, making friends, finding new companies to work for, all of that exciting stuff. And I think where we've come from with both of our discussions is AI is this potentially wonderful tool that's going to help event planners get rid of a lot of that work that maybe has otherwise bogged them down. And actually, it's going to hopefully, in my mind, enhance the human element, enhance, give people the time to actually create more of that human connection with one another because they're not so bogged down in spreadsheets or other tasks that they might otherwise have spent, to your point just a second ago, Richelle, is like a week, 10 days waiting for review, waiting to kind of deliver certain components. And it can make us move faster and then really reprioritize that notion of connecting with one another, speaking to people more frequently, thinking about our events in a different way. So I do agree. I think, especially in the events industry, it's not about replacing humans, but we do need to find ways to allow us to really think about that human connection and maybe emphasize it. And I think that's why AI can be a really useful tool for a lot of these things. But yeah, I know we're right up on time. I did just want to say, Rochelle, no, is there any final thought or final passing piece of advice you want to give anyone before we drop off today?
I would just say, let's keep talking and keep experimenting. And like I mentioned earlier, don't be afraid to try something and have it not work out. I think finding community with others that are also in the trenches with all of us is a really great thing right now. And just continuing to share the wins and the fails. I know Noah's been doing a ton of work with community building. We have a WhatsApp group of a bunch of event professionals across all corners of the industry. So that would be mine, is to keep sharing and keep experimenting. Noah?
Yeah, I would say don't be overwhelmed. There's so much information. I'm overwhelmed on a daily basis, and it's my job to keep up on the stuff and know what's going on. So you don't have to be on the cutting edge. Things are changing extremely fast. Like something that was working a month ago, um, or didn't work 2 months ago might be working now on a completely different level. So I'd say just be patient, keep an eye out for what works for you, and just keep testing.
Amazing. Well, Noah, Richelle, thank you again for spending another hour with me chatting about AI and events and really, yeah, just trying to work through a lot of this, a lot of these tools and information and processes that we're really digesting and learning as we go. So yeah, thank you both. Thank you for all your insights. It was great to see you, and thank you to everyone else for joining us, your questions, your thoughts, and yeah, we look forward to maybe speaking with you all again soon.
Thanks,
Take care.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.